Since you brought up the Antic to me was always the holiday of the neighborhood. I grew up on the Avenue. That was like our holiday. And for people who don't know the Atlantic Antic, I still think it's the best street fair in New York City. And it's just one day. But at the beginning, when we were little kids, they actually had a parade. Do you remember the parade?
I remember the parade, and I remember like the marathon, the little marathon where
Yeah.
you get the numbers to put on your chest. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think I coerced, well, I didn't coerce you, but my mother coerced you into being part of the LDC that actually puts on the Atlantic Antic these days. How did you become such a neighborhood person?
I guess I've just always been around. I work with a lot of local businesses. I've done a lot of logo work, and I've tattooed so many people that work and live in the neighborhood, and everyone in my shop as well, is that we're known to all the businesses, clients alike. It's been great to be that kind of ingrained. Next year will be our 20th year at Brooklyn Tattoo in the neighborhood. We've moved 4 different times, all within basically a 10-block radius. People I tattooed 20 years ago, and we're now tattooing their children. And the logo work, we hang out we go to the restaurants, and the restaurants come to get tattooed by us. Especially just, the Smith Street businesses are all, we celebrate and we commiserate together, especially this past year.
So tell me a little bit how you came to the medium of switching from painting a piece of canvas to painting on bodies.
When I graduated school in 91, I was up in Rhode Island. I would have gone to art school in New York because there's so many great art colleges, but I knew I was going to be here for a long time, so I figured I'd go away for a few years. And I started an artist collective called Urban Folk Art, and what we did was we had a silkscreen set up, and to fund ourselves, we would print T-shirts and posters and stickers for artists, nonprofits, bands. And we had a loft in Bushwick back before Bushwick was, what it is now. We lived with the equipment. We had a huge loft, 3,000 square feet for $1,200. We had a great time just being involved with the whole art and music scene. About 8 years later, we had moved from Bushwick to Williamsburg. We weren't living with the equipment anymore. Things were getting more expensive and smaller. We had a studio just for the equipment. We're kind of becoming a more commercial studio, like back when we were in Bushwick, we were doing our own T-shirt line and more artistic stuff, where now we were just kind of printing for other people. We weren't enjoying it enough, so I'd get rid of that and do something else. So while I was putting the equipment away, one of our clients, who was a tattooer, saw that we were putting it away, and he really enjoyed my art. This was in the late 90s. In 1997 was when tattooing was re-legalized in New York. It was illegal up until then. It was outlawed in 63. So they finally made it legal again. And this tattooer who I'd been printing for was going to open up a street shop. He was kind of underground shop at the time, working for somebody else. So he's like, "Hey man, I'm opening up this street shop. I love your work. I think, it would transfer well into tattoos." There was nothing I was ever looking into do. And usually you have to break down doors to get into tattooing. It was kind of offered to me in this magical way. And I had nothing else really going on. And I figured, why not? So I gave it a shot. I apprenticed with him. This was 103rd Street and Broadway, uptown, south of Harlem. I figured, see what happens. Apprenticed for a year, worked there for a year, and then they lost their lease. And so he moved. He was living in Carroll Gardens at the time. He moved his shop into a friend of ours building on State Street and 3rd Avenue, right around the corner from Hanks and Boerum Hill. It was the only commercial spot on the block. And so I started working for him there with another guy who was working uptown already. So within a year of that, he says, "Look, guys, I'm moving to London. I am going to work with one of my heroes, and I'm going to go get married to this English woman that I've been living with." And we were kind of flabbergasted. And he's like, "You can buy all this equipment from me and start your own shop, or I can sell the equipment to someone else and you guys can go work for other people." Now, this other guy, Willie, who is my current partner now, he's a musician. I was an artist, still continuing to do other art stuff. Tattooing was a day job that I loved, that was artistic, but, I still had other art interests. So we figured we'd take over the shop and we would be kind of the masters of our own destiny. Willie goes on tour. he wouldn't have to feel like he was going to lose his job if he didn't come back for a
Right.
month. If I had an art opening to prepare for, an art project I wanted to work on, we made our own hours, So that was it. That was 19 years ago. And, we've moved 4 times. We've had up to 8 employees at a time. Tattooers, they come and they go. It's funny because, I started up south of Harlem, then in Boerum Hill. Then the shop was on Atlantic between Henry and Hicks. And then we moved to Atlantic and Smith. And now we're at Smith by Sackett Street. It's like every time we move closer to where I live and further from where Willie lives. So now Willie's got the long commute.
I did not know that history about tattooing and that it was illegal. I mean, it sounds like the cabaret laws.
Yeah, there were rumors of how it was. And one was that the World's Fair was coming to New York and they wanted to rid, Skid Row and the Bowery and all of the tattoo shops and kind of clean the city up a little. And the other rumor was that there was a hepatitis outbreak and tattooing was going to, be the scapegoat.
Fast forward to the pandemic, you must have had art on the back burner that you wanted to complete and hadn't gotten to because of the tattoo. So tell me about that.
As a tattooer, and especially someone who's one of the owners of the business, I do have spare time as it is because I make my own schedule. So I'm always working on stuff. But during the pandemic, the shop was closed for several months and it kind of pushed me. I've always had commissions here and there of paintings and other pieces and freelance illustration, all this sort of thing. But when I wasn't working, I kind of had to start hustling that stuff a little bit more. I've never really loved the business sense of fine art. It was kind of a necessity. So I was pushing along a lot of stuff online. When I first did my apprenticeship, I said to myself, if this doesn't work out, at least I come out of it with a graphic novel. I've always been into graphic design classes in college and was always doing that kind of underground stuff. I did a graphic novel about my apprenticeship in the early 2000s. And I didn't get it professionally published, but I really dug the way it came out. Underground comics were kind of getting bigger, alternative comics. I was doing the underground convention circuit and, I was nominated for a couple of awards and it kind of became a glorified business card. It was getting reviewed in tattoo magazines as well as comic book sites. It's propelled my work a little bit. But people have always said since then, like, you should do a comic about what's happened since then. And The Apprentice was a year of my life. And along with everything I was doing at that time, it was a 4-book series. It took me 6 years to do. And I'm like, the year of my life is going to take me 6 years. What's 20 years going to take? Yeah. So I kind of blew that off. But as we were in the last shop before we are now, Atlantic and Smith Street, I started to kind of miss comics and I started to write the rest of, my tattoo career. Starting from when my apprenticeship ended up until where our current shop is now. So I wrote it, started working on it, got a little momentum, but with running a shop and working at the shop and working on other stuff, it was kind of slow. But with the pandemic, I was able to knock it out. So I now have, along with the Apprentice book, another 125 pages of the history of my 20-year tattoo career, depicting all the places we moved to, all the, trials and tribulations of owning a business, of, corporate landlord greed and, stigma of owning a tattoo shop, along with the joys of owning a tattoo gallery. It just encompasses the last 20 years of my professional life. So I was really excited because I was able to work on that daily as if I was a real comic book artist. So it was really fun to see it progress so quickly and to actually finish it. My wife works for the Department of Education, and all of the pandemic, she was in meetings all day long. So aside from making sure the kids were getting their remote work done, I had to look busy. Otherwise I get in trouble. So why not look busy by being busy?